All right. Hello, everyone. I hope you had a nice lunch break and got to see a little bit of the campus so far. You got lucky with the weather. It's the first hot week of the year, so you got the real LA feeling. I'm very pleased to introduce our first lunchtime lecture of the summer program today, welcoming both online and no, we don't have any online, but we have online? Okay. I thought only. So I'm welcoming everyone online and in person here, but we don't have online students yet. Those are starting next week, so that's what I was referring to. Anyways, I am very pleased to introduce to you Kutan Ayata, who is our vice chair here at AUD. And he is also the founding partner of Young Ayata, an award-winning practice based in New York and Los Angeles. Prior to joining UCLA AUD faculty, he was a full-time faculty at UPenn, and his other previous teaching appointments included positions at Pratt, Cornell, Columbia, and he received his Master's of Architecture from Princeton University and the Bachelor's of Fine Arts in Architecture from Massachusetts College of Art. Young Ayata, founded by Kutan Ayata and Michael Young, is an architectural design practice formed in 2008, dedicated to speculations on the aesthetics of near future. They work through images, objects, and buildings to build scenarios of the background. The practice is dedicated to both build commissions and experimental research. Both principles teach and view the academic domain as crucial to the continual development of architectural ideas, particularly emergent trajectories in architectural presentation. Young Ayata recently received the Progressive Architectural Award with their DL 1310 apartments projects in Mexico City. They are the recipients of 2016 Design Vanguard Award from Architectural Record. In 2015, they were one of the two first prize winners in the international competition for the new Bauhaus Museum in Dessau, Germany. They were finalists in the 2015 MoMA Young Architects Program in Istanbul, Turkey. And in 2014, the partners were the recipients of the Young Architects Prize from Architectural League of New York. And their entry into the international competition for the Daejeong Citizens Gymnasium in South Korea received an honorable mention. The firm's work has been published widely and has been exhibited nationally and internationally, including at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, Istanbul Modern Museum, the Graham Foundation, SCI-Arc, Princeton, Harvard, and Yale University. And I think one thing isn't mentioned here, the competition you won in Korea, right? Where Morgan is also part of. So very excited to have Kutan share the work with you. And then I think in a little while, we're going to have our second speaker arrive as well, Miroslava Brooks. But for now, super happy, Kutan.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to summer. It's kind of exciting to be here. What I wanted to do, kind of maybe shortly, it seems like everything I wanted to say is already said in terms of the practice. That's all right. Since this is in some way an intro for you into new disciplines, some of you coming from different backgrounds, some of you thinking about, contemplating kind of getting into the world of architecture, it was kind of maybe important to cover what it might mean to be an architect, and everybody has a different idea of what an architect does. You'll get this question a lot when you're an architect down the line, what kind of architecture that you do? And the answer is super murky because you never know how to answer that question. It goes to the maybe notion of people really don't have an idea of what is it that architects do. It's not as maybe I don't know, glorified masculine and kind of romantic as these characters that are betrayed, lonely and kind of painful. It's most of the time very collaborative. It's not as also romantic as one hand holding the pencil, either doing a drawing that's kind of brilliant on one hand, and maybe working through very familiar media of, let's say, models and drawings. It's also not only this where you just talk to contractors to get something done, but these are all maybe aspects of the things that we do as architects. This is a code that you'll encounter in this discipline, from its first day to the later parts of your careers. The fact that we don't, make buildings, we make drawings of buildings. What that means is, any idea about how we imagine the world that's maybe internal needs to come out into the world through mediated artifacts. And we do these things. We draw, we sketch, we render, we animate, we talk, present in instances like this. We animate, we make films. And yes, at the end, we do put forward buildings as well. But our daily labor in some way involves far more than the three images I've shown previously in terms of what we do as architects. But it's really about working through a set of mediations day in, day out, whether it's early stages of a project, whether it's development stages of a project, whether it's building. We do articulate kind of ambitions of architectural thinking through the way we communicate those in variety of media. And what architecture education does is it gives you the facility to be experts in the set of media so that you can be as clear as possible in terms of how to convey those ideas. And of course, this happened through a set of conventions, that you'll slowly begin to get introduced and kind of understand. It involves writing, it involves imaging, it involves drawing, model making, and other things. And all these conventions have specific histories in the way they have entered the discipline, evolved through time, and established their trajectories through evolving media that seems to come our way. The media that's available to us is an ever-expanding field. We do kind of still engage kind of analog tools. We all sketch, make models, but we also deal with emerging technology in the way the digital tools are being introduced almost at a kind of increasing rate, which forces us to think across the translation between these different media, but also maybe pushes us to develop sensibilities that oscillate between like rather traditional ways of making stuff, drawing stuff, but also what it means to kind of operate in our world of digital mediation. These are facts that we all have to encounter as practicing architects. And to do so means making kind of a commitment in terms of how one understands what a practice is. Now, architecture can be practiced in many different ways. You could foreground issues of environmental pressures, social justice, aesthetics, public works, private clients, small scale, large scale, local work, international work. It's important to recognize it is done in so many different ways at so many different scales. For us, we have started in 2008, went to school together, finished 2004, worked for other people, and then one day decided whether we want to do this together, and we've been kind of working together ever since. My partner, Michael Young, associate professor at Cooper Union, and I'm here since the last 3 years as associate professor as well, trying to kind of really work through a set of mediums that are ever expanding, understanding this not a medium specific discipline, but a medium promiscuous one, in which we have to kind of navigate these different trajectories. We kind of exhibit our work, we talk about our work, we write about our work, we teach, we kind of mediate ideas about architecture as a discipline in Instagram. you name it, right? Kind of our ever-expanding field of knowledge, kind of translation grows day by day. That is not specific to us. At some level, every architect had to engage it. Our work focuses on three main trajectories, maybe grouping, as Yule mentioned, starting with drawings and images, in which we kind of explore, is it possible to turn maybe the slide off? The drawings might show a little better. But kind of exploring with media and questioning maybe the conventions through which we understand what is it to draw, what is it to model, what is it to kind of map the world, much better. What is it to map the world around us, and kind of emergent aesthetics that come out of these studies. Even recently going into kind of engaging AI image making softwares to kind of produce a kind of maybe heightened tension between what we might understand as abstract and what we might understand as realism. Second category is objects, where we kind of experiment with conventions of 3D printing, articulation, decoration, things that are maybe have roots in architecture without capital A, but how these might translate into projects where we experiment with kind of decorative objects, somewhat functional objects that begin to kind of produce maybe other potentials in terms of how they can become part of everyday life. In collaboration with artists, further getting to questions of what it means to 3D print, what it means to kind of articulate a kind of faux materiality in objects that we touch, where maybe the actual materiality of the object begins to kind of go into the background, disappear, beginning to produce a kind of curiosity, a kind of doubt in the way an object might project into the world. We also do buildings, buildings mostly in the form of competitions, sometimes commissions that explore how these ideas that are being part of mostly self-generated experiments begin to kind of stand against the briefs that we are given by others, either institutions or private clients. We do a lot of competitions that that allow us to kind of push the maybe preoccupations, obsessions that we carry with us, to test them in a way where you are initially free of the constraints that one might have in a commissioned work, and see how far it can take us out. In those, you can maybe trace back already some of the studies in terms of formal approaches, surface articulations begin to come in and kind of find a way into exploring architectural potentials. And competitions in some way allow us to kind of track the changes in our own approach to work, our own shifting aesthetics in the face of shifting worlds. So in some way, kind of building kind of a library of projects that allow us to kind of evolve us as a designer, as designers, as architects. This is a competition Yulia was mentioning that we won first prize. It's currently in construction documents in farmland in Korea. But I do want to talk about one building, one big built building. As we are architects, ultimately, while our daily labor is other things, we also work towards getting things into the world so we can see them, others can experience them, and see whether what we do, what we imagine, lives up to the kind of projections that we put into the world. This is a small building in Mexico City, a 4-story multi-family residential building. And you can see the pin on the lower left. If center of the page is center of Mexico City, airport to the upper right, that's southwest of the city. In a hilly area, developing street where single-family residences are being converted to multi-family residences. And the initial projection of a project is a fair face concrete, means exposed concrete as a structural facade, and basically glass in the windows. It's form dictated by what the site could be within the given kind of brief. So you'll see in a work like this, the speculation on form is far more kind of controlled and perhaps toned down. But in some way, then the attention shifts to something like a window. So the project really has one detail. The detail is about how to deal with the aperture and what we call a window on a building face. And through that manipulation, through that articulation, the whole building kind of gains its character. The plan is kind of the plan. It's a rectangle. And what these windows do by rotating out of plane, allowing floor kind of rooms that are deeper into the building to have oblique views to the street in the front and to the views in the back. Fairly simple section, one duplex, and the rest is simple 2-bedroom and 1-bedroom apartments. But the project is really about this thing. It is to kind of take a very focused kind of understanding of how to make a hole in a surface. And by two different articulations, begin to define the character of this building. So it's basically a window that rotates out of plane. In one instance, it's all 4 sides are covered with concrete with a curving wall. And on the other side, it ends up with a trapezoidal large pane that holds the inner surface. So the goal here is just to bring it back to a larger conversation. And as architects, always wanna do that. Is how it relates to the other things that is done before you, and it might set up a different kind of trajectory within these classifications. So we understand windows as things that have certain significance, reference to a moment in history, their performance, to their aesthetics, etc. Could the window do something that lives outside of these classifications, that you could not reduce it to a time, you could not reduce it to a symbol, you could not reduce it to a language, but can it be kind of something that sits in between categories, that by itself, it does what it does for the building? In order to kind of conceptualize that, we wanted to understand kind of the window, not necessarily a cut that's made in a surface, but really the residual space between a thinning and thickening of a slab edge. And then, of course, comes the question of fabrication. How do you fabricate something that is not kind of in your hometown, is somewhere else where the expertise might be different than how we understand it to be. And the first assumptions we made, where we made a ton of corners in concrete, wasn't the right idea. So we immediately ditched this. You can kind of see there's always a material resistance to the ideas that we develop in the computer, and that at every process, the kind of assumptions you make are kind of challenged by the material facts and practices of a certain trade. We then looked into traditions of making these exquisite hyperbolic surfaces by Candela, where the concrete is cast with really small pieces of timber, both kind of rectangular and triangular shapes. And really began to experiment whether or not this could be a technique through which we could cast these sills and headers that would define the windows. These are first experiments. These are positives. The problem of making a positive was you could not do it for the 34 instances in the project. So we made positives to kind of extract negatives in fiberglass, which could be carried by one person, which could also be kind of flexibly put in and taken out in order for them to be reused. So the kind of economics of any projects are also constraints in terms of how you might begin to think about fabrication. So there are kind of different kind of surface articulation directions here, vertical and horizontal, in the way it begins to define the character of the surface. Trying to articulate the slab as a thickened element, all the vertical surfaces are articulated vertical strips. But the big challenge was how do you cast this all at once if you didn't want any horizontal lines? So this had to be kind of monolithically cast as one piece, and as low kind of technology, as low tech as it gets in terms of the construction methods at a scale of building in Mexico City. The kind of expertise and understanding the material itself by the local layman is an absolute treasure, because they had so much kind of advice in terms of how we could do this, that the kind of knowledge that we did not have. And again, as an architect, kind of moving between things like modeling and animating and digitally fabricating to things like, like you have to kind of vibrate the concrete in such a way so there's no air bubbles, so to avoid the cracks at the corner, the knowledge that can be brought by the construction worker. It's kind of a journey and mindset that one has to have to kind of move between highly, let's say, high tech and incredibly low tech when it comes to construction. These are the mock-ups that we're beginning to kind of see how this window is beginning to kind of work out. Then kind of firstly on the site, in some way, teaching us lessons in terms of how to work simultaneously with the formwork, how to make it more textured by simply like shimming the formwork on the site as a kind of spontaneous decision. How to work with things that we digitally fabricated on one hand, how it interfaces with things that they are made by hand on the site. Kind of a marriage of like the sterile work of mouse and the computer and the highly kind of hands-on condition of a construction site. And this collision hopefully is going to produce the kind of thing that we imagine, which now on site you're trying to really mediate to workers through spoken language that's translated, right, from one language to another. So kind of want to emphasize that kind of notion of mediation quite a bit, because at every level of designing, producing, implementing a project, you have to engage constituencies that vary from one to the other, from co-workers to consultants, to city agencies, code reviewers, to construction workers, clients, as well as end users. In the way you speak about a project shifts, in the way you talk about a project change, in the way you convey information, and the medium through which you do kind of changes as well. But anyway, back to the building. Things begin to kind of, let's say, come out in a form that's maybe a bit rugged, in a cleaner form where it begins to kind of get cleaned up, and you begin to kind of see the material effect of the things that you are developing in a computer take life and become a thing in the world. Now, the kind of building really conceptually hope to produce a very brute and solid and maybe mysterious object in a very narrow street. Your really kind of approach is not frontal, you're always approaching in the oblique. In the way the windows allow it to kind of turn the corner, oblique windows beginning to let the rooms in the middle to kind of access the front and the back. Begins to kind of set it apart from all the kind of alike buildings, let's say, on the street. It's a residential building, but doesn't signal that explicitly necessarily. It's a building that has certain scale that you understand to be perhaps operating at a scale of a neighborhood, but it begins to define perhaps another kind of type that one is not fully familiar with. But kind of upon approach, one begins to kind of encounter this moment where the trapezoidal window kind of, I guess, shifts its shape from one side to the other as you move. Kind of impeccable kind of local detailing, simple materials, just concrete, steel, stone, and glass. Allows us to kind of articulate this very heavy building as it kind of comes down to an inch thick edge in the way it's detailed through glazing and concrete. But this is the kind of big discovery of the project, things that you somehow discover through executing the work, things that you didn't really think of. This black negative corner, once you move inside, turns into a transparent plane and a dark plane, kind of making what you would call a window float in the middle of the room. And the big plane, because it's backlit now from outside, kind of disappears. And you're not really sure whether there's glass or not, also because of the way it's detailed, where it conceals the frame. So this kind of negative 90-degree corner does a couple of different things. It divides two rooms sometimes, having one operable window in one room, one big window in the other one. It defines little alcoves behind it, areas to sit, areas to kind of maybe stand and look out. And if allowing you to kind of look outside, inside, allowing you to kind of see through a variety of these windows simultaneously as you look from one room to the other. But also at a local level, defining kind of different moments of engagement with the outside, shifting, altering the floor plan that's otherwise highly repetitive. But here too, one begins to kind of see the effect of this window. It's what you call a window on a surface is completely changed. What you call an aperture is now at the surface of making the window. There are a whole relationship between how we understand the skin of the building is an evolving one. And only we will do that, architects will do that. You'll go to the most uncomfortable corner and look back. And then see, you can look outside, inside, outside, inside through your project. But it has these kind of reflective qualities of expanding the interior to the outside, as opposed to what the window does from the outside, where it kind of further thickens the building by play of kind of moving in and out of plane, allowing it to kind of build a expectation of poche completely disappears on the inside. But ultimately, it's kind of a building that sits on a garden that I've showed that before. But really comes down to kind of local craft, where very different than what it means to be an architect, let's say in a geography like this, in a place like Los Angeles or United States, where you can kind of say, why don't we take reinforcements from the site and make a gate? And it will be welded there in one day. Why don't we, bend some steel and make a handle? Some of these things come very easy, depending on where you are in terms of building culture, and it comes very difficult depending on where you are. But ultimately, the building is kind of this heavy mass that's as the time of the day kind of changes, begins to acquire a different kind of material quality, begins to perhaps kind of get lighter and softer, reveal what's inside. Not so much on transparency for the transparency's sake, but more towards the effect of altering perhaps the tectonic read of encountering something like this. This is the way it sits in the neighborhood, not necessarily giving you a clear idea of where one unit starts, where one unit ends, in some way masking how we understand the residential buildings, the unit articulations that we typically encounter. I believe this is my last slide. This is it. I know this is kind of a short version of a maybe very long lecture, but maybe we'll do that down the line on another day. But again, welcome to UCLA, and gonna have Mirka join us.
Hi again. My name is Miroslava Brooks. I'm an assistant professor here at UCLA AUD. And I also co-direct a practice called Forma. So I will kind of give a little bit more of a broader introduction to how we work and the kind of projects that we work on. Again, and unlike Kutan, I will not necessarily spend a little bit more kind of time on one project, which, by the way, was really fascinating. This was the first time I actually saw the project, which I really loved. But more, again, kind of jumping a little bit back and forth and speaking maybe more about the kind of ideas and processes that are interesting to us and our practice. So here we go. Balancing acts. This is the title. I've used it a couple of times, but I do think it kind of encapsulates a little bit of how we work and how we operate. So I will return to it a bit shortly. But this is the latest of our, as I call, profile pictures. And it was actually taken just a few weeks ago on a construction site. We are full service kind of architectural practice operating remotely for several years now since the pandemic. And we formed Forma almost 6 years ago when we were still both in New York. So my partner is Daniel Markiewicz, as you can see him there on the right, who lives currently in Philadelphia and also teaches at Penn. And I moved here last year, really, and started teaching here at AUD in January. We did meet at school, and this is one of the kind of things maybe to just think about, that architecture school is really a place where you get really close to people, both your professors, both your kind of, classmates and so forth. We separated and afterwards worked in different offices for a few years in New York. And then kind of came back together. But we do come from different places. And I come from Slovakia, which is a country of 5 million people, quite small, or where the kind of ubiquitous, repetitive, socialist housing is really juxtaposed against this kind of backdrop of beautiful high Tatras mountains. And Daniel, on the other hand, was born and raised in New York City. Where really the kind of iconic architecture of singular buildings, right, exists within a highly constructed landscape, especially on the island of Manhattan. So I think these kind of contrasts inform how we think, how we approach our practice and architecture, and really kind of enriches our collaboration. In retrospect, I think of our kind of very first competition entry, which foreshadows some of our kind of future interests, explorations, and questions we've been asking ever since, such as, how can landscape and building coexist together? How can intuitive and rational design processes feed off of each other in a kind of productive way? Can architecture be both orderly and whimsical at the same time? Can architecture be both kind of, catered or designed for individual needs and experiences, while also kind of fostering a sense of collective and a sense of kind of belonging? How can architecture be both of its time and timeless? And so this project, we were kind of building on a typology of a bell tower, which is very common in historical towns of Italy, really hybridizing in a kind of more utilitarian gable extrusion of a derelict factory building, which was already kind of present on site and needed to be kind of incorporated into the overall design process, which you can see on the left. So this was our very, very first competition that we did together and kind of jump-started our office. But the title Balancing Acts really partially references not only the kind of balancing act of being a teacher, a practitioner, and parents. We are both parents of very young children, which, let me tell you, is a kind of feat of strength on its own, but also the kind of balancing act of design processes. So where we constantly evaluate and ask ourselves how the architecture can kind of straddle between these various dichotomies. Rather than really thinking of these terms as opposites, though, I think more frequently we are wondering if architecture can kind of exist in this between zone. So where we see a productive tension created between these two sides, right? The aspiration really, of our work lies perhaps somewhere in between, really striving to kind of produce a kind of third new condition that encompasses aspects of both. Here we go. We work with realistic imagery very early on. really kind of trying to speculate about not just the aesthetics of the project, but really issues of materiality, atmosphere, specific ways of kind of inhabiting space, and explored, alongside circulation, structure, programmatic adjacencies. And then, although our work really spans like different typologies and scales and functions and locations, we love to work through orthographic plans, since the plan really kind of offers a certain degree of abstraction, right, and freedom, where we can really kind of quickly test spatial and organizational ideas in the orthographic space while also being rigorous and clear in our intentions. There is no question that recent new technologies raise the kind of possibility, right, of synthetic and comprehensive ways of designing and managing buildings. And I'm sure you'll kind of learn about some of them during this exciting program. But in recent years, there's also been a kind of return to the plan as a kind of topic of discourse, right, and kind of focus of architectural energy, which really suggests that there's a kind of renewed interest in the kind of correlation of form and politics that the plan describes. So the plan is both kind of projective. It kind of imagines the future in habitation and construction of what is yet to come. And it's also analytical, right? It kind of focuses our attention to certain aspects of architecture. So it's not just a kind of simple horizontal cut through a building. It really kind of encodes activities and physical presence, and as such, it defines how we use three-dimensional space. What we do in the office very much informs how we both teach. So for example, this is actually a picture from last fall, the first quarter here at AUD. In the MARC program that I coordinate, we start from the kind of plan as a generator of architectural ideas and speculate about the kind of possibilities of inhabiting planimetrically organized space. And lately in the office and in my teaching, really, I've been asking myself, can we develop proto-methods of kind of collaborative space making that are grounded in architectural core fundamentals, being the architectural plan, for instance, while really expanding the kind of disciplinary periphery? How can we productively, creatively, and willfully use the kind of new technologies such as the AI and the image text flow, in our design processes? Can we put precedents and contemporary AI technologies and tools in a kind of productive dialogue to open new possibilities for design? What is the role of precedents and how do we use them? How can we creatively harness the kind of shifting relationship between control and chance? So initially, a really kind of simple desire to test some of these readily available, neural network platforms. This was a kind of self-initiated design research 2 years ago in the office that really offer a kind of new exploration into this long-standing interest in the architectural plan. It is not uncommon, right, for architects to look at their previous work when developing concepts of new projects, rejected ideas, unbuilt designs, and failed project starts. They all kind of provide this fertile ground. But rather than simply reuse old concepts, proto-plans, and this was kind of the title of this project, aim to recycle them, stripping them, mixing them, analyzing them, and reworking them into kind of entirely new creations. So here, we took 2 of our previous projects, actually one being the a library that I just showed, a plan of the library project that I showed, and another one was a kind of bathhouse. And ran it through a series of these processes, generating kind of new proto drawings that really actually ultimately led to 2 new projects. The drawings and the kind of really large physical models were displayed in a kind of accompanying exhibition, which was at the 2022 Acadia conference at the University of Pennsylvania. Really, what was kind of interesting for us to think about is how the plan is not just something, again, as a horizontal cut, but also how can we structure space from the bottom up? So this was one project. And really kind of, through a series of interior vaulted spaces, subdividing the kind of existing warehouse building. Both of them were situated within a very clear perimeter of a warehouse, reconfiguring the movement and views. And the other one was approached as a kind of RCP plan, so the reflected ceiling plan, and how actually that can structure space from the top down, right? So organizing actually light and structure. Again, I will run through 3 very quick projects, but the kind of common thread is, again, that these 3 projects, which are self-initiated, very much tied to how we teach, and especially some of the kind of either advanced studios or comprehensive studios that we have taught in the past several years. This one, for instance, it's Playscape, and we're still kind of working through some of these ideas, and it's going to be exhibited actually in Stanford, where it is located. Takes the approach of building being a kind of really long line, and how does this start to structure space and a site. I'm not going to go into that much detail, but I do want to mention that this particular project really starts to ask a series of questions we've been really interested in for the past several years. So how can the playground reclaim its function as a kind of creative laboratory, right, for learning about and experiencing our physical world? How can play open up novel ways of thinking about ecology, community, and public space? So here you can see a kind of partial zoomed in plan or top-down view of the ground, which is ultimately a kind of collective space of the city, right? And it stages the kind of flexible and scaleless playscape, offering really meaningful kind of urban space for children and adults alike. The second one, a second kind of subset of these self-initiated research projects, which actually started with another competition, which is on the left. They are the kind of larger scale projects that we don't necessarily have the clients for yet, but we are very much interested in kind of thinking at that scale through some of these concepts and some of these issues that come with large scale projects. So one of the kind of fundamental and recurring themes in both of these projects and the previous one is really kind of thinking of the idea that the building is not a hermetically enclosed interior, right? That the kind of inside might be more closely connected to the outside, and really starts to kind of set a series of loose relationships between buildings and landscapes. We often look at art for precedents. I always bring up this slide because this was a kind of generative piece of artwork when we were working on the competition for Mozambique Preschool, which was, by the way, the one on the left. Really kind of, again, interested in ideas of randomness and looseness and what that might mean for architecture and what that might mean for site organization. This is a kind of large building, large physical model. We love to build physical models to kind of test ideas. But you can see basically that the entire site, which was a kind of more rural site, was subdivided into these smaller kind of sub figures. And then the building actually sits as a kind of square under a kind of very simple roof. However, on the ground level, as you can see, it is actually a series of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 smaller buildings that are actually subdivided with smaller passages that actually bring light, air, kind of cross breathe into the kind of communal space. Again, I'm kind of flying through these because I want to get to through everything. But the kind of common thread runs through many of these projects here. This typology, for instance, envisioned a kind of really a new type of a building, which would pair kind of activities of a bathhouse, which is a kind of communal, right, space with a kind of utilitarian function of a data center. There's a lot of research actually done that, data centers kind of waste a ton of heat, into its surroundings. So we were kind of trying to really think about how can you utilize it and how can you pair it with a different type of program that could actually be kind of a symbiotic relationship, form of symbiotic relationship between the two. So again, a very clear perimeter, right? The building has a kind of square outline with a series of leaky permeable thresholds, which actually are the pools that can kind of transition from inside to the outside without any dominant clear direction, right? So there's no front to the building. The plan, again, a kind of loose collection of artifacts, right, that actually come together at the semi-center that one could kind of circulate around. And from the exterior, the building would really appear almost scaleless. So a kind of undetermined, almost mountainscape, mountain mass. While from the inside, the landscape would be actually framed as an object through a series of very specific thresholds and openings. So I'm kind of flying through all of these a little bit because I want to mention that these self-initiated projects and or competitions have been really important for us from the very beginning, as we are kind of constantly, balancing between the self-driven speculative work and a kind of client-based commission work, right? So as many young offices, most of our client work is residential, single-family houses or kind of multi-family units. You can see just 3 of these projects, 2 are completed on the right and the middle, and then this one is, we just went through permitting and it's going to start construction at the end of the year, the Adelphi residence. But almost always it kind of involves existing conditions, right? Often within complex code systems that we need to kind of navigate and learn about through both the kind of design processes and construction, right? So this is what we work with also. Reinforcing structure, updating egress plans, completely gutting out buildings, right? It is the kind of meat and butter of our practice in a way on the kind of client side. But in fact, as our building stack really ages, I think the work of the architect will involve more and more of this type of work, where one will need to kind of learn from how to negotiate between the kind of old and the new, between the kind of realities of, and constraints of everyday urban fabric and our kind of internal design aspirations. Even within the kind of stream, and we categorize these projects more as the kind of homes. So these are the kind of residential projects, and then the commons, which are the kind of larger scale commons. But testing ideas independently of clients, again, is very crucial, even on the kind of smaller residential scale. And we've been doing it from the very beginning. So as many of our self-generated work carry kind of seeds of ideas and questions that then kind of find their way back to projects that we are actually working on with some of our clients. We've done a series of design research projects that deal with domestic typology, so specifically the house. Here, for example, the projects developed kind of concurrently, so we're kind of developing them at the same time, and really ask how the kind of boundary between the interior and the exterior can be blurred through specific architectural moves. But we're also really interested to kind of investigate the precarious relationship of the beach home typology to the ground. At the time, we actually had a potential client that wanted to develop a site on Fire Island, which is actually the first house we started to work on, which of course then never realized, but it did kind of jumpstart a series of these questions that we wanted to follow up with. This is not an atypical site in many coastal areas, houses fully elevated on stilts, responding to kind of sea level rises and erosion. It's so bizarre. And we kind of, thought this is kind of cool. So can we actually utilize it, and start to kind of rethink what is the relationship of a house to the ground? Like if this is normal, then anything goes. So in these 2 projects, we're really looking at 2 different structural systems. One is a kind of series of parallel shear walls, which is on the left, organizing the house along a kind of really strong central axis. And then on the other side was a point load system of columns, which is almost a kind of, tree-like assemble. And with each project, as I mentioned, we were really interested in this kind of exterior spaces that almost felt like interiors, right? Like creating a kind of domestic setting that is at once kind of monumental, but also intimate. The plan was absolutely crucial, and again, it always is in everything that we do, kind of developing of how social interactions would be organized within each house. So in this case, the house functions as kind of pulled apart. Sorry, the house functions are pulled apart, and there are kind of open courtyards in between, with 2 bedrooms on each level, which are actually on the left side here, right? So each bedroom unit actually has completely, fully autonomous, independent entry, and you don't have to interact with each other. The second house, on the other hand, is a kind of really tight cluster configuration of smaller units, right? Organized and really encouraging communal living. Because when you notice the bedrooms, which are on the left side, actually share a bathroom. So it's a Jack and Jill bathroom and a terrace, right? So this kind of configuration would inevitably actually kind of reconfigure how your daily activities and or interactions, right, with the inhabitants are arranged. And of course, each house was oriented towards the kind of ocean view. That was one of the kind of requirements of then the client. So at the beginning of the pandemic, we were approached by a very unique client. Again, a project that never materialized, but two young families wanted to build a kind of family compound in the woods, which really pushed us to kind of consider alternatives to multi-generational living in a rural setting. So we produced a design study which looked at 3 different strategies of how to combine 3 typological elements, which are really kind of ubiquitous in the upstate New York area. So there is the kind of gable house structure, which you can see outlined in a black. Then there is the stone wall, which is the kind of almost this series of ancient walls that are everywhere in upstate New York. These are the thinner lines that are kind of delineating edges of open areas. And then an open meadow within what would be really kind of otherwise densely, wooded site. And so each study proposed a kind of symbiotic relationship between the architecture and the forest, right, through use of clear, large-scale organizational strategy. So a square, a line, and a circle, really kind of offering various approaches to proximity in cohabitation, right? So in some instances, you would never have to interact, whereas in other instances, again, the kind of day-to-day interaction would be probably a little bit more encouraged. So the square, in the kind of structure, the 2 family homes and a communal area would be really kind of unified in one building, organized around a central courtyard. So again, what you see is really just the one side of 4, right? The line, a series of decks would kind of carve intimately, really kind of smaller volumes of space, and really would visually kind of break up the really long linear barn structure, which was really kind of not to the industrial, farm sheds of the area. And then the last one was the circle, where this is just one instance of it, where the kind of aggregation of gable volumes, which made the house really appear as a collection of multiples. So we went through multiple rounds of these meetings with the clients. They showed us their amazing property and so forth. And then again, it went nowhere. But that's a lot of times what happens. But a lot of times I think these are the kind of opportunities that really jumpstart other projects, other ideas, and other things that you kind of carry forward. So I will end with a project we are currently building. Yes, it is a square in plan and almost a cube in 3 dimensions. But the approach in a way was to work with kind of most minimal footprint with maximum space and maximum kind of visual impact. So it's been really a labor of love. I thought that Kutan's project lasted almost 5 years. I think it was, yeah. This is coming to 4 years, and it's a tiny house. So maybe that's also the difference between US and other countries. I don't know. But it was also something that it started during a pandemic. So it absolutely had a huge effect on, the entire project from the beginning to the end. But it's a project. Again, we've been thinking about it so much, right? Because again, like from the very beginning to the end. But I've been thinking a lot lately about how to kind of create architecture that is of its time, right, and relevant, but also kind of transcends the quick changing fashions, right, and tastes. And I don't have an answer. I'm not saying this is the kind of house to do that, but we have been really trying to kind of think about like what is a house, what is it of that place versus what is it of not that place, something that belongs but also doesn't. It doesn't look like a house to many, but what should a house look like? I don't know. These are some of the questions we've been exploring, but this is our first project where we kind of found and purchased the land, visiting tens of, just almost 100 different sites over the course of many months, the first year of the pandemic. It was actually very useful kind of to understand, right, the qualities of a good rural developable land, paying attention to the slope of the site, access points, views, types of trees, like things that you don't even think about when a client kind of already comes to you with a site. So it was a really useful exercise. This was, and this is not playing, is it playing? But this was obviously during winter. So when the house was just kind of erected, the main structure was erected upward, positioned on a very gentle hill. And it's kind of almost, again, as I mentioned, perfect cubic volume, oriented towards a kind of small pond. Finding contractors in the area was absolutely just, again, another feat of strength. Fighting the pandemic effects, on material costs and labor availability and so forth. So it took us a really long time, but we did find one, which we're happy with. And so I'm trying to, well, just a few more slides left. And this is not, here we go. And initially, really, after two different designs completely, like we're starting to kind of conceive of these as a very small, compact cabin. So the preliminary facade studies show the relationship between the kind of openings, the wood facade material grain orientation. You can kind of see the different seams, how they travel through 4 different sites. And again, the kind of structure's relationship to the ground. These are some of many, many iterations. But ultimately, this is the kind of final configuration. From certain angles, the structure appears scaleless. Again, like kind of disguising the fact that this is actually it's a small but 1,400 square foot, 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom, 3-story house. And in fact, really, scalelessness is again something that we've been kind of interested in from and through different projects, which is for another lecture. But speaking of material kind of realities and constraints and so forth, figuring out even just a very simple material kind of transition around the corner, for instance, when you have a typical 6-inch plank, was a challenge. So this is kind of a contractor trying to figure out on site how to do that. And this is a house from just a few weeks ago as they're kind of finishing the siding. There has a little fuzzy hair on the top. It needs to be trimmed, but it's almost there on the outside. We have a lot to do still on the inside. Last couple of slides, I do want to mention that again, just like with any project, I think you have to pick your battles. So, with this project, I mean, the 3 bedrooms that are oriented west, they have beautiful large windows. They are very small and compact in size, right? We kind of understood the bedroom really as the kind of primary space for sleeping and or potentially an office. But the 2 really important spaces were the kind of ground area deck, which would open into a meadow, and then a kind of double height communal living, kitchen dining space, which actually overlooks the view to the east. The house, and this is my last slide, the house is projected to be completed at the end of the summer, so wish us luck. But I do want to mention that, architecture is an incredibly collaborative process, and you cannot do it alone. It is really kind of humbling to go through the construction processes on, where you really start to kind of appreciate how much effort and energy does go into erecting a building, and how much energy and effort goes into kind of constructing our environment. So it is also incredibly exciting, right, to kind of acquire the skill sets and the knowledge, right, necessary to participate in that process, and really kind of ultimately shape the world. So Yeah, I hope that you guys are excited about starting this summer program. But thank you for listening.